Should rioters be banned from leaving prison early? 0207 862 2222 is the number. Downing Street's confirmed some people jailed for taking part in the recent unrest will be eligible for release after serving just 40% of their sentence. That's down to a policy announced by the government just weeks before the Southport killings sparked violent anti-immigration protests. The scheme's expected to free up 20,000 spots in Britain's prisons, which have been running at 99% capacity for at least a year and a half. Violent rioters sentenced to more than 4 years and those convicted of terrorism will not be eligible for early release. But BBC analysis suggests the average prison sentence for rioters is just over 2 years. Is this the right way to... Should we make an exception, Jess, for people that were caught up in these riots? Caught up, I say, actively engaging in these riots and, you know, committing crimes, attacking policemen, setting hotels on fire. Should that be a special case?
I think it should, because I think they need to be made an example of. What we've seen, you know, it was violent protests. We've seen a lot of, I think there's 26 peaceful protesters, non-violent protesters from Just Stop Oil who are in prison at the moment. A lot of them serving 4 and 5 years for not even going on the protest to start with. So when we look at these people who purposely went out there, attacked police officers, attacked emergency service workers, they attacked mosques, they purposely attacked black and brown people, you know, this was a racially aggravated attack, and we're meant to be making an example of them so they don't do it again. We're meant to be saying, we don't accept that in this country. But actually, if we're letting them out, first of all, 2 years, personally don't think it's long enough. But then if we're going, just serve about 10 months, actually, is that long enough for someone to be, you know, rehabilitated, to not have these views, to know what they did is wrong? Or is it enough for them to go, actually, I'm just a bit angry about this, I'm going to go back on the streets and do it again?
Yeah. Cristo, what do you think? Is it, I mean, when you say it like that, 2 years down to 10 months, that's a stark difference, isn't it?
I think that there is an argument to say that should anyone be released on 40% of their sentence, and that's a fair argument. But if you're talking specifically about keeping these rioters in for longer, that's inconsistent. In 2011, 20% of the rioters who were non-violent were released early. These are non-violent rioters that they're talking about releasing early. And if we are going to do it for the riots that happened in 2011 and release people early if they're non-violent, then the consistency should be that we do the same with these people. I think we need to move away, as awful as some of these people were in some of their rhetoric, in their actions. I don't want to live in a country where they go and attack people for the colour of their skin. It's repellent. But we need to start looking at, as we have done previously, as to why these people, some of them, felt that this was the right course of action. We've done that in 2011 with the riots. If you look at, there are articles from 10 years on from the 2011 riots where people say it was terrible criminality, but we need to look at the bigger picture as to why people rioted in 2011. It was sparked by Mark Duggan, the death of Mark Duggan at the hands of the police, but actually it was about something deeper. If you look at the Brixton riots in 1981, huge riots, huge disorder, the then Tory government, a right-wing government, commissioned the Scarman report, which actually came up with the reasons why people were so disenfranchised and angry, and came up with recommendations as to why they felt that way to try and prevent this kind of thing happening in the future. Black Lives Matter, we did the same.
I think it excuses a lot of this behaviour because people, it kind of saying, oh, but these are people who feel really bad about what's happening in the world, you know, they think their jobs have been taken away from them. No, these are people who actually just took to the streets because they feel like they were emboldened to act out them behaviours, because we see the media who constantly print blaming anti-asylum seekers, rhetorics on their pages. We have politicians like Nigel Farage who say we're not being told the truth. We have influencers like Lawrence Fox and Tommy Robinson who are going on X and putting out fake news. So I think, yes, you know, we look at the 2011 riots, but these were racially aggravated riots where people weren't going, oh, actually, I'm going to protest the cost of living crisis because I can't afford my heating. I'm going to protest women's safety because there is an epidemic of misogyny that's happening. It's people who felt emboldened to go act out their racism.
They weren't doing that in 2011. Anyone who was rioting on the streets in 2011, no one was. They were looting. They were rioting for the Black Lives Matter protest. I think it was 17 police officers that were injured, one seriously injured, and within 2 days, you've got Keir Starmer photographed on his knee for Black Lives Matter. Therefore, acknowledging that there is a context and that actually what they were rioting about, as much as the violence was abhorrent, was about something bigger. Because in this country, thankfully, we do take a more sophisticated view. But I feel like in this instance, in any other instance, the examples I've given, Black Lives Matter, Brixton riots, 2011, we all said, and society said, there is context to why this happened. Whilst condemning the violence, there's a bigger picture. When it comes to this, if you make that point, you're called an apologist or someone who is excusing violence.
I want to make sure that we take as many calls as this as we can. Tom's in Essex. Tom, do you think this reduction in sentence shouldn't apply to people who were involved in these riots?
No, I think it should. Because I think Keir Starmer, I admire him for what he's done. He's dealt with this rioters tremendously effectively. He's brought in the police first of all. Now he's brought in the judiciary. Now he's quenching the judiciary by realising that his original dealing with has succeeded because the rioters didn't come back. So he's proven himself. His policy has worked. Now he's reducing the policy because he knows that if those policies are implemented, it may bring forth more support for those foolish people who are now in prison. So the only thing I feel disappointed is in the Home Secretary. She said, we've lost respect for the police. Well, after what the police did, we should be commending ourselves to the police for the effective way they dealt with the rioters. So my respect for the police has gone up tenfold. Now, the Home Secretary should take the baton and deal with the underlying causes of those riots. Well, that's where I think the next conversation should be progressed.
Tom, I got the feeling with what Yvette Cooper was saying that she was saying a loss of respect for the police is part of the cause for the riots. You know, people felt emboldened. They didn't feel like the police had the authority or the respect there that they needed to prevent those riots happening in the first place.
Well, that's very hard on the police, I think, because of social media that deals with things so fast. The police can't come into the scene as quickly as we would like them to. No, I think that is not a real good reason to place judgment on the police. I think they've done magnificently, as best on our behalf. There were so many rioters. They were better organised than the police, that is true. But they had this terrible thing called social media on their side to deal with their ruthless, violent and despicable actions, which are utterly condemned. Yeah. No, the Home Secretary is the next person to take this further into the right direction of travel.
Thank you, Tom. Callum's in Edinburgh. Callum, do you think that this reduction in a sentence to 40% of the sentence should apply to rioters equally?
To some, yes. Absolutely, yes. But not the ones who committed serious crimes, like I just saw one setting a police van on fire. And as far as respect, I mean, I have a lot of respect for police, and I know that a lot of people up here in Scotland, they don't like the police. And yesterday, forgotten the man's name on the panel, said, we only call the police when we're in trouble, yep. But how about we get to know the police when we're not in trouble? And I think that is a terrific idea. But as far as the rioters go, I'm glad that they did what they did. Not the rioters, I mean the police and the courts.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, guys, that the rioting that we saw during that time seems to have gone away. Is that because the action that's been taken was
Well, is that
effective?
because they're thinking they're getting 2 years in prison and actually they're getting 10 months, you know? I think in this country, prison is seen as we're meant to be rehabilitating people. Is that my concern is, are people going to be able to be rehabilitated within the time they're in prison? I mean, 2 years was the higher end. Some people just got a year or 10 months. So really, if you're in prison for 4 months, are you actually just going to be angry and feel that that isn't enough of a reason for you not to do this again? And I think, you know, we're saying it's not serious crime. I'm sure people of colour who feel terrified to be out in the streets streets at the moment. You know, I've heard of people, asylum seekers, having to go out the back door of their hotels because they're afraid of being attacked. You know, to them, this is a very serious thing. And if we're letting people out early, we're kind of just saying, OK, it's actually OK that you're being terrorised in the street as a person of colour.
It's really interesting you use that, because it says that this reduction doesn't apply to those who commit acts of terrorism. Is possibly the answer to this that we redefine what we saw over those couple of weeks as domestic terrorism and then bring charges on that basis?
But then what do we do with domestic terrorism? What we do is we condemn it, we criminalise it, we arrest people and throw the book at them when they carry out those heinous acts. But we also analyse, how do people get radicalised into thinking that that's the right course of action? We ask questions, we have conversations around what drove someone into that horrific space where they carry out these crimes. Media's a part of it. Social media is a part of it. But also a failure of the state for 30 years has led to this point. The misinformation, in my opinion, on social media around the terrible events in Stockport, that information was clearly wrong, but it could have been anything that sparked this off, because this is 30 years of resentment of an underclass of people who feel like the state, those in charge, have put other people before them. That is mirrored by exactly the same reasons why there were riots in 2011 and in 1981.
But why won't people, and if they feel like they're, you know, have people going before them, they feel like they're being let down by the government, why were they not rioting when their heating bills went up? Why were they not rioting when they can't afford the cost, you know, food's going up? It's actually just, you know, but now they're rioting again against asylum seekers. So is it because they feel let down by the state, or is it actually a reason to just act outrageously?
The way you respond to it is a completely different matter if you're frustrated. Anyway, after the break, sorry to jump in there, Jess, we are going to take more of your calls. More of your calls on whether jailed rioters should be banned from leaving prison early. They could be eligible for release after serving just 40% of their sentence. 0207 862 2222 is the number. We're going to go straight to Nevina, who's in Kent. Nevina, what do you think of this? Does it make sense to have that consistency and let all prisoners, apart from those who've been involved in terrorism and other specific crimes, give them that 40% or 60% reduction?
Yes, it does. It does. There's far more crimes going on that have lighter sentences than that, and I think it's disgusting, because I don't agree with rioting necessarily, but the government wants to open its eyes and see what is going on. They know what is causing all these problems. Why don't they do something about it? The people of this country don't feel they're being protected or listened to, and that's why they are now rioting. They've tried the other avenue by voting Labour in. That didn't work. They've tried other things and it's not working. And they just feel, I mean, what's about these no-go areas where we're not allowed to go and wanting to bring...
What are the no-go areas? What
the
areas
no-go areas? The Muslim areas where we as white people are not allowed to go into.
Why are you not allowed to go there?
Because it's run by the Muslims and they say they don't want the white people in there.
What Muslim people have said no white people are allowed to come here? Whereabouts?
I don't know, but it's a well-known fact that there are certain areas in this country which are no-go areas to the indigenous people of this country.
The indigenous people, what would you call an indigenous British person? Not a Muslim?
Well, not necessarily that, because some of them are probably born in this country, I suppose. The same with some Christians are born in this country and other countries. But I'm saying
Nevina,
they want fair play.
Nevina, I'm lucky with my job. I get to travel all over the country, and there's nowhere I've been where there were signs up, or I ever got the feeling, or somebody told me that I wasn't welcome. I genuinely have never found a no-go zone in the country, and it upsets me that you feel that there might be places where you feel you can't go.
Yes, well, it's up north mainly, isn't it, where all the trouble goes, you know.
I spend half my week in the north of England. I spend half my week in the north of England, and I genuinely have never come across that. I've been welcomed wherever I go.
Okay, then again, the media is lying to the British public then, aren't they?
Nevina, thank you for your comments. We're going to move on. Anne's in Hertfordshire. Anne, do you think that it makes sense to have consistency and that people involved in these riots should get the same reduction as anybody else if they behave themselves in jail? What do you think?
No, they should get a reduction, and also I'd make them pay for the crime they committed.
OK, that's interesting.
I think they should pay for the damage they caused.
OK, so...
And I'd say something to Cristo. I miss your 522 channel show.
Oh, well, thank you. You can find us on YouTube now, or, of course, watch me right here.
Well done, thank you. Is that your mum? Is it? She called you
Hi, Mum.
Let's go back to the subject, if it's all right. So let's deal with the first part of that. You're saying yes to a reduction, that should be consistent across all of the crimes, whether they were involved in these riots or not. Is this not the moment, though, to make an example? Do you think that the standard sentencing structure...
No to reduction.
No to a reduction. So
they should get a reduction in their sentence. They should serve their sentence.
OK.
They've committed the crime.
So this is the question I got for you, Anne. What's to prevent them behaving badly in jail then? Because that's the other purpose of a reduction of your sentence, is it's time off for good...
If they behave badly in jail, increase their sentence even more. OK.
I mean, we have tariffs for sentencing, so the idea of adding more on after that seems a little bit unfair, doesn't it? You should be able to tell your family when it is you're coming out.
Well, don't do the crime and you won't be in the first place.
OK. And thank you so much. We're going to take another call. Mick's in Chester. Mick, do you think it should be the same rules for rioters with sentencing?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. What I would like to say is, imagine if you were sat in your house now, surrounded by all your furniture that's been wrecked and ransacked by a burglar, knowing that a policeman isn't even going to come round to your house. You wouldn't be very impressed with somebody getting a 10-year sentence for throwing a brick. So I'm afraid I don't believe in shortening of tariffs for any criminal. Not at all. But if you're one of these rioters, who I do not agree with at all, but you see paedophiles, murderers and rapists getting early release and you're not because of one alcohol-induced stupid act, then I'm afraid where is that possible justice across the whole board? It simply isn't.
No, but people were throwing bricks at mosques. I think we need to remember that these are racially aggravated attacks. It's not just throwing a brick in a random street. People are throwing bricks at mosques. They were setting alight houses, hotels that housed asylum seekers. Like, we need to remember the reason behind this. It was racially aggravated, and a lot of people of colour, don't feel safe on these streets. And we need to remember that, because it's not going, oh, well, I might have a burglar in my home. OK, I get that. One, they're not releasing sex offenders early to start with. So, and rapists should get longer sentences. I 100% agree with that. But it's not the same. We need to look at why these people are rioting and not go, oh, well, they just threw a bit of bricks in the street. You know, we need to stamp out these attitudes in Britain so they don't, turn into something even more dangerous.
But earlier, when I was trying to explain some reasons why some of these people were rioting, it was you sort of claimed it was an excuse for it, and it's not. It's looking at how people got to this point. I just want to pick up on Nevina's call, where she was talking about no-go areas. Now, Nevina is. I don't think Nevina is correct, but there is a perception among some people that, and I would say probably mainly white working class people, that there is a hierarchy that leaves them disadvantaged in this country, and that has been a failure of the state for the last 30 years, successive governments, and that is a failure of infrastructure, a failure of people being able to get doctor's appointments, hospital appointments, all of these sorts of things that they see other people jumping the queue and having different treatment to them. Now, in many cases, that might not be actually the case. In many cases, they're turning to the person who might be, of a different race and ethnicity to them and blaming them rather than blaming the state. That's wrong.
They are being encouraged in many cases.
And that's also a part of it.
They're being encouraged to turn to the person next to them who may look different to them.
Absolutely, when it's actually the state that's failed. But unless we have an open conversation about that, unfortunately, people like Nevina and others are going to go to the darker places online and actually say, well, these people are the ones I should listen to because they're the only ones talking about it. And without moderate people actually saying, look, we do need to listen to what's going on here, unfortunately, these people are going to be seduced by people who don't have their best interests at heart or who might not be being factually accurate.
Thank you, Cristo. We're going to have to move on. Thank you so much for all of your calls on this.